think we're about to begin. If everyone wants to grab a seat, there's a bunch of seats right up at the front if anyone wants to sit down. How am I sounding, Ajay? I'll just hold it further? Yeah, exactly. Okay, I shouldn't eat the mic. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, perfect. All right, cool. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Welcome to Trajectory Labs. Show of hands if it's your first time here. Awesome, cool. And for the people who are coming for the first time, did you find that about us through Meetup or Luma? Oh, sorry, Meetup. Raise your hands. Luma. Raise your hands. Okay, all right. It's starting to get more even. All right. Yeah, thanks so much for coming. A little bit about us. We are Trajectory Labs. We're a nonprofit based right here in Toronto. Our mission is to catalyze Toronto's role in making sure that AI is thumbs up for humanity. We believe that AI is going to be a very big deal, industrial revolution or greater. We think that type of transition could happen in decades, not centuries. And we think that Toronto has exceptionally well positioned to do even better in terms of contributing to this. So we run a workspace here. We run events like this, and we provide support and resources to people getting involved in the field. That is us. A bit of housekeeping. If you need to go to the washrooms, they're right outside the glass doors. And if you need to get back in, you can use the keypad. Just follow the signage. Please don't bang on the glass. I think that's it for logistics here. And then, yeah, if you enjoy this event, we do events every Tuesday and Thursday. If you've been looking at the calendar and the no events for August, don't worry, those will all be announced by tomorrow. Yeah, we do events on policy on Tuesdays and on technical AI safety and similar stuff on Thursdays. So hope to see you again. And without further ado, let's get into today's topic. Just a quick show of hands. Has anyone read the series of essays, The Intelligence Curse, yet? Is it just me? Cool, great. You're all going to learn stuff today. Right, so this is a series of essays published at intelligencecurse.ai by Luke Drago and Rudolph Lane, and we're essentially going through them today. They were my primary source for this. Also, by the way, if anyone wants these slides, you can go to our YouTube channel, and there's a link on there in the description. But honestly, I would just go straight to the source, intelligencecurse.ai. Right, so we're going to have a quick introduction just to lay some groundwork for what's going on today. And then they have 7 essays, but really it's like the first and the last can be skipped. So there's kind of 5 key concepts we're going to go through one by one, and then we can have some discussion about it. By the way, if you do have a question, feel free to ask. But questions, if you have like a cool idea you want to share with the group, that's for the discussion period at the end. But if I say something that doesn't make sense, or if something has been unclear, please just raise your hand and ask a quick question. If it's going to take you more than 3 sentences to ask, though, that's not a question. All right. So moving on. Yeah, this work assumes the creation of AGI, that is AI that can do all economically or almost all economically meaningful work, as well as a human and as cheaply or more cheaply. And it then compares this to the intelligence curse. If anyone here has experience in economics or political science, so you may be familiar with this idea. We're going to get into it later, but yeah, this talk today is largely just an analogy to this existing concept. And then, yeah, the author spent several essays. The first 3 essays or so are 3 or 4 essays are outlining the incentives that exist that may push us towards intelligence curse dynamics, and then they finish it off with what's essentially a very, very long wish list in a lot of ways, just a lot of different things that can be done to hopefully move us away from the situation. I just want to emphasize the first point here. This assumes the creation of AGI. If you're very skeptical about the idea that AI can ever replace all or most economically meaningful work by humans, this is not going to make much sense to you. So you kind of have to assume that will happen sometime in the near future. For the rest of this, this is an exploration of what may happen should that goal be achieved. So, first section, pyramid replacement. Basic idea here is that an increasingly powerful AI, and that could be like a group of AI or a system, something replicable, will trigger pyramid replacement. And this is a pyramid in terms of like a corporate structure. So as an analogy for firms, but also for governments. Yeah, it's going to examine how that might go. So Yeah, the idea here is we have these major AI labs, OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, Google, a few more of them have like openly declared that they're trying to build AGI. Some of them think it can happen as soon as next year or 2027. But that, yeah, today's talk doesn't really hinge on that. Even if this takes another 10, 20 years, all this stuff is still relevant. Um, yeah, they make the case for why we can expect this might happen sometime soonish in the coming decades, years or decades. So, up until 2019, AIs couldn't really write coherent paragraphs, and that was expected to be very far away, and then suddenly they could. And then AIs could, write the bar exam better than humans. Now, by certain metrics, they're scoring, 49% on various coding problem resolutions. Yeah, if you look out there, there's tons of different metrics, and uh, uh, yeah, AIs continue to do pretty well on them. And here's just one of many kind of synthesized. This is already outdated, by the way. They had brought forward it recently. But yeah, this is one metric put together by Meter, which is um, a firm that does evals, and basically it's their job to measure the growth of AI capabilities. And this one is about kind of the length of tasks that an AI can successfully complete, um, and how over time, the AI systems get better and better at doing tasks that take longer and longer to do. Right now you can't tell an AI, go run this restaurant for me, because that's the type of project you do on like a year, a year or longer horizon. AIs can't currently do that. But if you say, write me a poem, write me a limerick, it takes an AI like a second or two, right? So it's very, very good at those things. And over time, they are becoming better and better doing longer and longer tasks. And this is just one example of many that AI is getting better, essentially. Um, so governments have started to notice. There's been a congressional U.S.-China commission that recommends a Manhattan project like AGI program, and Trump has announced the $5 billion project Stargate for AI infrastructure. These again are just two examples of many. Governments are starting to realize this is a big deal. There's a whole bunch of infrastructure being laid out, and the question we're looking at with the pyramid section is, what happens to your job when AI arrives at your workplace? So let's compare it to past techs. We have things like laptops. Uh, I don't believe there was a big outcry, I don't remember, about like laptops or computers coming for your jobs. Well, why? Because you still needed a person to operate the laptop. Um, they could make employees more predictable, but they couldn't outright replace them. Um, the authors are making the case that AI is different. They're expecting a scenario possibly in 2030 where you actually can just like plug and play AIs where humans were. They can respond in like natural language. They can go out and pursue more complex tasks on their own. Um, and with a lot of earlier technologies, you had to have a human in the loop somewhere. The more capable AI has become, the more burdensome having a human in the loop is. And in addition to that, like even if you have certain actors, like certain companies, for example, resisting this pull to implement more and more AI, they may not have a choice because they have to compete against other firms. So we might expect something like this, where they start with an example of like white collar firms, where you have your C-suite at the top, and then the senior management, middle management, junior employees, entry level employees. And they talk a lot about how like entry level employees are doing super simple tasks. If it's your first job out of college, where you're a relatively bright person, this is still in company's interest to hire you, and then have you do these very basic tasks, and you learn how the company works, and you kind of work your way up the pyramid. Um, and The authors here are claiming that AI integration is going to also work its way up the pyramid, and that first, like before you see mass layoffs due to AI, you're just going to expect a general like freeze or slashing of entry level employee hirings, and then the kind of pyramid of a company will look a little more like this. Like they might still be hiring a few entry level employees, but there's going to be a lot of AI replacing them, and you can argue this is already happening. They link to several examples like analyst positions are like there's a smaller number of analysts doing a lot more work. And yeah, as time goes on, they expect that AI is essentially going to creep up this pyramid. Then junior employees who again do like more complicated tasks than the entry level employees will then get automated replaced. And not all of them at once, but just a greater number. There'll be fewer entry level employees because they haven't hired from before, few can get promoted, and etc. And then they expect by the time you get to like middle management being replaced, they just aren't hiring entry level employees anymore. And you can imagine how this all goes until you yeah, even have a C-suite at the top just commanding a bunch of AIs running a company, and yeah, they say we might even get to the we can even get to the point where strategic level decisions like you have boards representing shareholders are realizing, oh, we actually have advanced AI systems that can make decisions better than the C-suite can, and eventually you just have entire AI firms. And again, this is remember the key assumption here is assuming that we do have AI systems that are cheaper or more effective or both than any human at these jobs. What you can expect is that over time this would happen, and companies that resist doing so will simply get outcompeted by more and more AI-heavy companies because those companies have AIs that can work day and night. Might only cost $10,000 to run one of them a year instead of paying a salary. So this is the expectation. Right. So some caveats here. This is like, of course, an oversimplified story. There are diffusion barriers. There's regulations. There is skepticism by the leadership. There are things like union pressure. Yeah, we don't expect this this change to happen overnight right away. And jobs vary in automation difficulty. Software engineers are more vulnerable than interpersonal roles, for example. If something that can spit out code, we very much do have AI systems that can spit out code, but we don't have AI systems that currently can do, negotiation with different partners. We have a question. Yeah, because as they compensate for like revenue, like more money is probably nothing. So in the same amount of money, there can be more companies popping up. Oh, the earlier stages where like some entry level jobs like were made, so you can have more like startups. Yeah. So the people who would have been entry level employees or junior employees are instead starting their own companies. Yeah, the entry level employees have other companies. Yeah, I think that works as long as AI replaces like only 90% of human economic level activities. But as soon as you get to the point where AI is actually can do virtually all economically meaningful tasks, sure, humans could just go start other companies, but they're just going to get outcompeted by the firms that are just totally dominated by AI. That's the idea. Yeah. Does that answer the question? All right. Oh yeah, for our online viewers, the question was why wouldn't we just see more companies popping up in their hiring entry level positions? Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it does make sense to expect in the short term you don't see like massive employment because as long as there's some useful stuff for humans to go elsewhere, the kind of like if we got to like this point, I think and like AI got no better than this, I think a lot of the dynamics we're going to talk about here wouldn't play out. And things would be looking better. We could always be middle management. It would probably be called something different. But yeah, the expectation is AI can actually get to this point where you can replace everyone. Doesn't look too good for people founding the other companies. Right. So some other caveats. Oh yeah, I was talking about software engineers versus interpersonal role. Some industries require more prestige soft skill and are harder to automate, so we don't expect this to be uniform. Um, uh, they do argue that tech companies themselves could be largely automatable within 1 to 2 more AI leaps. So yeah, right now it's not really clear how this would work within construction, but if you're building a B2B SaaS, like it maybe looks a little more obvious how this would happen first. And they're claiming this is a default trajectory, not that this is inevitable. That there are theoretically some technological governance interventions that could change this pattern. We're going to get into those in the last section. But they do claim that this is the default path, assuming we get to this level of AGI. Right. And they talk mainly about white collar work. Oh yeah, and for people that might say, well, maybe we'll all just be laborers. Like they kind of say we're expecting robotics to eventually catch up, and then they'll follow the same dynamics. Yeah, but and the claiming this is actually today's problem. We're starting to see the beginnings of this. I think there is mixed data on this at best myself. But you can argue that there are definitely examples of like CEOs of various companies. Like I believe it was Shopify CEO had this like internal letter that like everybody in the company has to be using AI to do things, and he doesn't say in the statement oh, like we're not hiring any more junior level entry positions. But I think that's the fact that everybody has to use AI before you claim that we need to hire someone new is how that tends to look in practice. And then there's also been a lot of economic models trying to examine like what will happen to human wages in this scenario. So there was one that claimed there was 1 out of 3 chances that wages could fall below subsistence levels by 2045. There is another one. This is a separate one. Again, we gave several examples. You can dig into the paper yourself if you want to do them. That shows. Oh no, it's blurry. Um, right. So yeah, business as usual scenario, baseline AGI scenario. The baseline AGI scenario. This is uh, I believe this is meant to be the amount of work that like humans can do more effectively than AI. And yeah, you have this initial period where things get better slightly, and then they kind of plummet once it's a burden to employ people. But yeah, okay, this should be pretty intuitive. If you know your work is can be better done by an AI, probably not going to get paid much. Right. So there are three mechanisms they talk about here. There's increased labor supply, fixed labor constraints, and human minimum wage versus AI. So increased labor supply. If you have an AI that can do a job really well, the way they currently work is they're very, copyable. That is, like, if you find a human that can do your job well, you can't just instantly spin up, 1,000 clones of them and pay them all the same wage. You can do this with AI. Fixed input constraints. If you want to shelter more people, for example, you have to find housing for them, you have to find food, you find a desired place for them to live. For AI, you can very scalably spin up a bunch of data centers. And then there's this idea of like a human minimum wage that is like, this isn't like a legal minimum wage. This is a, like, if you don't pay humans, like if there was no legal minimum wage, there's still going to be a minimum wage we need to pay humans for us to have enough like food to eat to survive. We still have to provide enough energy, and there doesn't appear to be this like floor for AIs in the same way. Yeah, people talk about like, well, you can expand social safety nets, but this is limited by fiscal constraints and cultural resistance. We're going to talk about more on that later. And yeah, they gave some examples of analyst job cuts and AI triggered layoffs already happening. And then just as like a very high level tuition bump, if you're very skeptical of this, remember that today's AI systems are the worst they will ever be. That is true essentially every day. They are improving at breakneck speed. All right, so before we move on to the next section, anyone have any questions about this pyramid replacement? Yes.
Yeah, just an idea in my mind. Opposite side of it, AI don't pay taxes because people get income and they pay the taxes.
Yes, that's actually
how economic it works.
We're going to talk about that more in detail later, but that's a very good point. Yeah, the AIs don't pay taxes. I mean, arguably they theoretically could through a corporate tax scheme, but yeah, that's very, very important to one of the later sections. We will touch on that. Anyone else? Cool. Right, so second section, capital AGI and human ambition. So summary of this section, yeah, AIs are going to make non-human factors of production more important than human ones. And the result could be a future where today's power structures are permanently frozen, basically limiting social mobility or progress at the societal level. So there's a common claim that like money won't matter post AGI. We'll have this, just material abundance. Everybody has what they need. The authors claim this is exactly backwards. AI makes capital a general substitute for labor. Effectively, data centers replace human mental work. This is building on the points in the previous section about kind of minimum wage for humans. Instead of instead of like we're moving on to the societal level here rather than the firm level. But yeah, instead of like we'll get into this in a second. So essentially the ability to buy results in the real world will dramatically go up. So the human ability to have real power in the real world will dramatically go down because the value of people's labor will go down. And for most people, that's their main lever of power. It's going to be harder for humans to achieve outlier outcomes relative to their starting resources, and this is going to dramatically reduce people's ability to change their status in society effectively. This is we're going to get into each of these in more detail now. So the default solution to this is like to unemployment stuff. A lot of people go straight to like UBI. We're going to have superintelligence. It's going to create this post-scarcity technological wonderland, and we'll have the fully automated luxury gay-based communism. There's actually a book if you guys want a fully automated luxury communism, and I think it was just Reddit came up with the gay space part, but I just thought it was mean. Right, so people are like, well, what's the problem? We have AIs do all the work. We have maybe we just have this one super intelligent entity that we've told to take care of humans. AIs do all the work, and humans just reap all the benefits. So we don't need money. So the authors argue money will continue existing. First of all, because prices communicate preference or communicate information between actors. Like even if you have this like post-scarcity world, um, well, okay, it argues effectively there is no post-scarcity world. Like we're still limited by the like the amount of energy available to us in like the solar system or wherever, how far society has expanded, and prices are still important for communicating what you want more of, right? Like even before we had current capitalist systems or markets, it still costed more resources to get some things than others, partly because people wanted more of them. But yeah, so they effectively argue that you're still going to need money, even if people aren't getting paid, as a way to to indicate preferences. Um, yeah, and so even in a world where humans aren't getting no longer need to work for the economy to keep flourishing, you still expect that you're going to need money to get the things that you need. Um, right. So in the past, they talk about like world change has been driven by outsiders achieving outlier success and gaining power, and this is one of the key ways in which people are able to change their kind of status or level in society. Um, and these have been things like entrepreneurship, work in the hard sciences, intellectuals, politics, military. So things like entrepreneurship, like VCs, if they want to, um, if a venture capital firm wants to have leverage on the world and make big changes, what they do is like their job is effectively trying to find really really effective human talent and then paying them to go out and make incredible products that change the world. In a world in this AGI future, now the incentive is to simply find an effective AI to do this. And it makes the job more about like how much money can you deploy. Hard sciences, you can easily imagine if AIs are running experiments, then humans aren't doing this. It talked a bit about intellectuals, like there are um, there are people who've like provided a lot of the value to the world through like frameworks and ideas that aren't like hard metrics. People like they give examples of economists like Hayek or like some of the Enlightenment thinkers. But again, we can expect that like um, if we do reach this level of AGI, you can just have systems that are churning out a whole bunch of different ideas, and then the credit doesn't go to individual people. So this pathway of like kind of changing your status in society won't exist anymore, and you have this like freezing of classes. Politics, they brought up as this was a kind of a counterexample. People say you're always going to want humans in decision making. In decision making places, like who's going to vote for an AI. They talked a bit about how you can expect AI avatars to be like, cause can be able to run very, very effective campaigns and people vote for them. I was a little skeptical of this claim. I thought they should have elaborated a bit more, but yeah, that was it. And then like another way that people have changed their status in society has been like through military change and stuff. They're expecting that if AIs do become this good, AIs will be heavily integrated to the military, and this will favor like incumbents. Effectively, if your ability to wage war is heavily dependent on the size of your data centers, how much energy you can secure, this no longer becomes a situation where like a rebel army can like like wage guerrilla warfare. It becomes a bit more favorable to the currently entrenched powers. So they're expecting that a lot of these kind of alternate paths to kind of changing, your status will go away. Yes.
I was wondering how politics not change if the people with main labor power labor problem.
Sorry, could you repeat?
So in a world where people's economic power is taken away because their labor is more and like physical power of the people also no longer matter because the military is mechanized, then how does that like with politics still even matter?
Yeah, that's what they're arguing is that like yeah, these are meant to be roots to outlier success. So like okay, I should repeat the question. It was like in a world where like other sources of power like militaries are automated, like does politics even matter? Um, you might call it something else if it's automated, but the main point they're making is like close to what you're saying that like how does politics even matter if all this stuff is automated? Exactly. Like so this is like no longer a route for people to change like their current status in society. Yeah, maybe I should have made it clear on this slide. This was like this was a subsection about like about making it harder for people to basically harder for like economic mobility. Another question.
We're like bot farms that are filled like 100,000 bots in a farm. They can sway um, social norms and anything they want to sway, really.
Yeah, you brought up the example of bot farms that can sway public opinion.
Yeah,
What is there a question? Or?
yeah. They said, would it
I think,
be included in this group?
yeah, I think it's an example of why politics will be like a more difficult route to like achieve your change in society if like a lot of the like when you describe bot farms that are able to basically spread a whole bunch of information to make people convince people to go one way or another. Um, like I think that's a very good example of like how
That be AI avatars?
yes, that sounds similar to that. Okay. Okay. So if like kind of traditional paths to like social mobility are like closing down because of this, how about just like enforced equality? Like redistribution. We mentioned that early on. Um, so there's a book that they reference. I've forgotten the name of it that argues that historically inequality reduction on a broad scale is primarily driven by four different things: war, revolution, state class, and pandemics. Or if you do broad surveys of history, like when does it happen when you have like a very unequal society and suddenly resources are more evenly distributed? It generally is the result of like one of these crises. So yeah, the intelligence curse authors lean pretty heavily on this. That you effectively need some large crisis. They also pointed to some examples of like there have been societies that have like really doubled down on like we are going to make sure that like everybody gets an exact equal amount of resources. And historically, especially for the last 150 years, that has not worked very well. Those societies tend to collapse, or they tend to, the USSR like being a big example of a place that did not really realize that dream. You end up getting sucked into the same power dynamics as other places. So yeah, they're expecting also like a lot of like in theory, you could come up with kind of governance structures that forcibly redistribute things, stuff like UBI. But this is going to be happening like during a period when there's like massive capital intensive AI scramble between countries and companies. Where if you want to stay competitive in the world, if you want your nation to not get outcompeted by your neighbors or some of the companies, you're going to be scrambling to just like integrate AI as much as you can to secure data centers and energy. It's hard to see how the countries that and the firms that remain competitive are also going to be the ones that really prioritize figuring out how do we force like or how do we make sure we get the redistribution things right. So yeah, they didn't quite make the case that it's impossible, but it just does seem difficult because you need to do so while remaining competitive. So they make the case that okay, so a lot of these paths to social mobility are going to be closed down, and there's this risk that if you go down this path, then suddenly, however much money you had or whatever your resources you were in control of before, kind of determines where you are. Right. So they expect the default outcome will be those with capital, when AI arrives, gain permanent advantage, because money is going to convert so trivially into superhuman labor in any field. And they maintain that there's like a few different potential scenarios here. There's the best case scenario, which is like a static, unequal but rich society. So they say like a more unequal Norway. We'll get into that a little bit later on. They had a bad case scenario where you have this kind of AI trillionaire aristocracy with unchecked power, where if AI takeoff is essentially very concentrated, in the future, the rich humans will be like, well, why are you wealthy? Well, my great grandfather was like a systems engineer at Anthropic or whatever. Then they have the worst case scenario, slow rolling optimization for AI power over human prosperity. If anyone was here for Dr. Dubinad's talk on gradual disempowerment, they're referring to this. That's worth a read if you haven't read it. But yeah, this is a world where, yeah, like even the wealthy humans, eventually their power gets eroded. Right, and so now they're leading towards like the intelligence curse. So you have, just to summarize the last section, advanced AI threatens both normal careers and outlier paths. The normal careers through that pyramid, the outlier paths by eliminating the other roles. They expect human power comes from economic relevance, and that AI deletes this. So they say in recent history, you had state incentives aligned with human welfare due to labor value. If you want to have the wealthiest countries in the world right now have very kind of dynamic, diverse economies, And so it's very, very helpful to invest in like, things like school and like resources to make sure people are happy and healthy and educated. That wasn't always the case. But they argued that post AI, uh, like if humans are no longer super important for generating power or revenue for governments, there's going to be less of a priority to take care of humans. So we're going to expand this in the intelligence first. So this is the middle essay, which is the main thrust of this. Any questions about the previous section? Or I move on here. Oh, yeah.
Did they talk about what humans are like, oh man, all these AIs are controlling everything, that's really bad. We should like try to like attack the data centers and like, you know.
They don't talk about this. I think the Butlerian jihad is like from the Dune universe is like this historical event. So we'll talk about the. Anyways, that's a different thing. Any Dune fans? No. All right. Yeah, a few. All right, cool. All right. Thanks, Jasper. That was very enthusiastic. Cool. They don't really talk about that. I think they don't really talk about it directly. The examples they gave were like, yeah, there have been scenarios where like there have been like uprisings of citizens against their governments. The degree to which that's referred to, it's pointed out that like you're not going to have like one country where if you overthrow the AIs, everything's okay. It's like you have, there's 200 countries in the world, and like maybe in like, half of them people rise up to support the data centers, and the other half they like integrate AI very heavily. Like which countries then are going to be the dominant ones that kind of end up controlling more of the Earth's resources? Probably the ones that, didn't smash their computers. Yes. Okay, I got that. I got it. Yeah. So the question is about do the authors account for things like open source technologies where the technology is very diffused to people? Yes. In later sections we'll get into that. Yeah. Spoiler. That's one of their proposed solutions to fight off some of these dynamics. Yeah. Good question. No. Okay. The intelligence curse. High level summary with AGI. They expect powerful actors will lose their incentive to invest in regular people, just as resource states today neglect their citizens because their wealth comes from natural resources instead of taxing people. So this is really kind of the core of the argument here. Right. So they talk about there have been past revolutions like the agricultural revolution. There's the industry that drove human potential further. That is, the amount of kind of prosperity and freedom and kind of longevity that we have today is like much, much better than it was in the agricultural during the kind of pre-industrial agricultural world. I think you could make less of a case that was the case for the agricultural world compared to hunter-gatherers, but yeah, there is this like idea that broadly we've been driving towards like more human welfare over time. The idea there is that like that's because we've used the tools to produce more wealth, but we've needed humans at every step of the way. They say AGI looks a bit more like coal and oil than plow the steam engine. What they mean by that is that digging coal and oil out of the ground takes a lot of capital. It's very, very expensive to do so. And so typically it's been like a smaller concentration of large companies or countries have been able to control this resource. Contrast that with something like the plow. I don't know why they use steam engine actually as an example, but the plow I think is a very good example. It's a relatively simple tool to manufacture, and you didn't see this like big concentration of like people who have plows or people who don't. It was just like if you were farming, you learned how to use a plow, and the main input there was human labor. So they argue it's going to be more like coal and oil. It's going to be concentrated among a few labs, their states, and chip manufacturers. And they expect that states and companies earning AI rents won't need to rely on people for revenue. This is the intelligence curse when a power actor implements AGI. They lose the incentive to invest in people. So let's get into how they expect that will happen. All right, so why do powerful actors care about you? Two reasons they argue. There's a return on investments and there's an impact on their power. I mean, you could argue these are the same thing. But yeah, like right now, The Canadian government, I think, does like a decent job, actually a pretty good job if compared to most countries in terms of like, deploying infrastructure so we can drive places, making sure people have access to education, um, things like this. And in return, we, learn how to be, productive people. We have all sorts of jobs. We pay quite a bit in terms of taxes, and Canada remains like a very stable place. So, yeah, modern states effectively rely on taxing people and corporations that can invest more in productivity, and you get this positive feedback loop. More education infrastructure, more productivity, more tax revenue. The people are happy, the government is happy. Oversimplified, but you get the basic idea. And you can argue this applies to industry as well. Like the wealthiest companies on earth tend to also take pretty good care of their employees, at least in terms of like material goods. Google, famously started a lot. Well, yeah, they're known for like being one of the first companies that, like really, really incentivize you to be at work. They'll do your laundry for you, like a Michelin star chef to cook meals for you. And yeah, uh, as people make more money, basically actors cater to them more. So then you have the opposite side of that. You have the resource curse. There's rentier states. Effectively, these are states that derive income from resources, not citizens. Venezuela, Norway, Saudi Arabia, Congo. Norway seems pretty good. We'll get into that later. But yeah, an example of a typical. Okay, I will say as well, like Norway is like very much like bucks the trend. There's many, many countries on Earth that are very, very wealthy in natural resources, and there's a negative. There's an inverse correlation between having a lot of scarce physical resources and having a lot of people living in poverty. That is the resource curse. I think I might have asked already. Who's familiar with the resource curse from economics, politics? Only not many people. Okay. You have to take my word for it. If you look up the resource curse, this is a very widely researched thing. Right. So, Democratic Republic of Congo, known as an example of one of the poorest countries on earth, also known as having a ton of physical resources. Like often, it's kind of the go-to example if you talk about like if there's a special metal they need for electric cars or something. When they talk about like unethical supply chains, it's probably related to forced child labor, digging cobalt out of the ground in the Congo. Yeah, and it's just one of many examples. Yeah. And the core problem here, they argue, is like from the last section. It's like if the governments and the powers that be in those regions can get most of their money and power from the resources in the ground, and not as much from the productivity and like dynamism of their economy from citizens, then they are less incentivized to take care of their citizens. Now, it doesn't always go this badly. They brought up two examples of like very resource-rich places with similar GDP per capita, say Oman and Equatorial Guinea. So those who don't know, Oman is a country in the Middle East. It is in a region that is very, very volatile. I probably don't need to tell you, but it's doing comparatively well. It's like it's run by a sultan who it's like has a lot of oil, and its citizens are generally well taken care of. It like was able to reduce its infant mortality rate like much faster than its neighbors that are culturally similar, for example. Opposite end of that, you have Equatorial Guinea. This is a country in like it's West Africa that has lots of oil underneath it. A similar case to Oman, and things have not worked out as well there as in Oman. The vast majority of the country lives in abject poverty, and there's like a small, tiny group of elites that live very, very well. So I guess at this point we should be very interested in like why did that happen? Those two different ways for those two places. If these dynamics do play with AI, how do we get to be a bit more like Oman than Equatorial Guinea? So, okay, first getting back to making the case for why this is a good analogy. So you have AI, they argue, is even stronger than the resource curse because it keeps on improving and replaces humans across the entire economy. Compared to oil, like as well, oil is like quite limited, whereas AI, like there isn't like a limited supply of AI that you can like dig out of the ground. It's like a self-improvement thing over time. So they argue that the dynamics of like you can just get more money from this thing instead of your population. They expect that the incentives there would be even stronger. And states can earn money from corporate taxes on AI companies, not human taxes. I think that was your point earlier. Like, humans pay taxes into this. Yeah, states can still earn money from AIs. It would just be through corporate taxes if the economic system is still remotely like ours. So AI labs could be the new rentiers extracting rents from all economic activity. Yeah, and they make a few points here that this might not quite look like governments. It could be multinational corporations getting stronger, even more powerful than governments. But it doesn't really matter in that, like, you can expect the same dynamics at play here. So most people can't support themselves and they lack the economic power to make demands. This is very much what the situation is like in places like Congo, Venezuela, Equatorial Guinea, and the economy increasingly sidelines human consumers in favor of more powerful actors' goals. So for resource curse, you're talking about like oil companies. In the intelligence curse, you're talking about like data centers and AI firms. So how do we break the resource curse? So there's effectively two ways to break the resource curse. There's effective governance to redistribute and economic diversification. So they talk about the Norway example. Norway is like the biggest counter example to the resource curse. Norway has a massive amount of oil compared to its population, and Norway is also often held up as like one of the top standards in terms of nation that takes good care of its people. You can argue they did it through effective governance primarily, but also some economic diversification. I think this is like a weaker case for them because they still do get most of their money from oil and they're like sovereign wealth fund. But yeah, they had a big advantage in that they had a strong democracy before the oil was discovered. So they gained independence. I think it was in 1905, and were kind of right out of the bat. Since then we're established a pretty well functioning democracy, and then after that the oil was discovered. And I believe they mentioned in the article like they don't know of any counterexamples for this of like a country that was like dictatorship or very poor human rights record and found resources and then managed to pervert itself into like a well-governed democracy. Because well, good that they've got all this other source of income and power. So there's a problem that like few states are as democratically and functional as Norway. Like the world's not full of Norways right now. And they point to global freedom has been declining for 19 years straight. Actually, I pulled this from our old data. This goes back 100 years. I was going to clip this through the last 20 years to like make the point harder, but I actually thought it'd be fair to show the whole thing. Like, this is a political civil liberties index from our olden data. This is basically the fall of the Soviet Union, and there was about large amount of populations then became more democratic and free. But yeah, you can see in the last 20 years things have been trending a little bit in the opposite direction. I wasn't sure what to make of this. It's like I don't know if the last 20 years is a good example, but I think you don't have to worry too much about this, and that as long as you agree that we can't assume all countries will be Norway by default going into the AI, I don't know what we call it, AI revolution or whatever. What was that?
I was going to say revolution.
Oh, okay, nice. Okay, two of us revolution. I was going to say singularity, but that seemed a little strong. Okay. Right. So economic diversification is harder with AGI. Unlike oil, AI isn't a limited resource requiring diversification. So there have been some examples of countries that are like trying to become a bit more free. So some of the Gulf states, for example, like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, have historically been like not too great on the freedom index. But in recent years, they have been realizing that oil is going to run out, or demand for oil will fall. And there has been a big push, like in the last 10 years, if you look at like women's rights in Saudi Arabia, they're still, I wouldn't call them great, but they have improved a lot. I think women are allowed to drive. This has been like one of many, many examples of like how they've opened up their economy to tourism. They're starting to invest in education. They're trying to attract like more foreign workers to go there. And they seem to be trying very, very hard to move towards a diverse economy. Which does incentivize better treatment of their citizens. But it seems like the main reason they're doing that is because they realize the oil is not going to last forever. So that doesn't seem too promising in the AI situation, unless, we do expect that AI abilities are going to hit some like hard ceiling, or there's like a limit on how much you can get out of them. It doesn't appear that way for now. So main kind of point here is democracy is likely a necessary precondition for breaking the intelligence curse. All right. Any questions on that? Or move on. This is like a really important section. Giles.
Is that like an anti-Norway separation of democracy?
Oh, good question. So the question is there an example of a country that was a really strong democracy and then found resources and then backslid? I don't know, probably. Um, if anyone has any ideas, please. Yes?
Iran, probably.
Iran, actually, yeah, that's yeah, you could argue like yeah. So Iran was definitely a very very liberal, progressive place, especially compared to its neighbors back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then in 1979, the Islamic Revolution happened, and things have not been going so great for them since. Um, that's potentially a good option. I don't know how much of that had to do with the discovery of oil, since there were like a lot of other dynamics at play, but I mean, it's worth thinking about actually. Yes.
What's going on with Oman? Was it democratic before? Or like, is
Um,
it the same thing as
it's
Saudi
not.
Arabia?
I don't think it's super democratic, but I think that I don't actually know too much about Oman specifically. What I learned about was reading in here, and what I know is that the government has like deployed like a whole bunch of like invested a whole lot into like medical systems and like infrastructure and like education and stuff. I think that it's very much like a little bit more like a Singapore type place where like by like Norwegian or Canadian standards is like not quite as democratic, but like people are still well taken care of, and it's like generally a um, good place to be. Uh, but I don't know. Like, yeah. Yes.
Going back to the second and last point, that statement, economic diversification is part of the media, seems somewhat counterintuitive to me because I'm trying to have a picture of AGI is diversified.
Yeah. That's a good point.
This idea that you could find something that isn't AGI.
I should clarify what's meant by that. Yeah. So the question is like, it seems weird for them to claim that economic diversification is harder with AGI because like AGI by definition can do all these different diverse set of tasks and different things. So wouldn't you expect economy? I think that's true. In this specific context, diversification means like not relying on a particular resource. And in this situation, like that resource is AI. So diversification in this context for AI would be getting like meaningful parts of your economy are not dependent on AI. Does that answer the question?
It does, yeah.
Your face doesn't tell me it answers the question.
Yeah, and it's just because I find it harder. The economy will, I guess, naturally want to continue to exploit various forms of AGI. So I see there's this, you want to count it in terms, but it just seems that maybe I'm just having a hard time understanding this thing that way to potentially want to get off AGI.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah. Yeah, if a place has become very, very successful thanks to AI, it's hard to imagine an analogous scenario to, Saudi Arabian oil, where like, oh, it's going to run out. Let's invest in people more. Yeah. I think you understand it correctly. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
How about the point that AI require a lot of energy, heavy energy support, and the countries like at the last economic, they will become, they have some advantages because they have uranium, they have all semiconductor chips, they require rare minerals.
Okay, I think you're pointing to the fact that like because
Because
AI
of-
is very energy and materials intensive,
Yeah.
countries that start out with lots of energy supplies will have an advantage. I fully agree.
So like even Venezuela, they have like a lot of oil, and if the energy will be need more for AI, like some countries will flip to the top.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think it's generally true that like during this you're gonna see a lot of countries either left behind or going to do much better because of their natural positioning regarding production of I guess like either in the chip supply chain or energy. I think that is true. I'm not sure how that impacts the resource curse though. Maybe we'll get into more later. Anyone else? Okay, moving on. So shaping the social contract. Right. So they're arguing intelligence curse will break the core social contract. And they're suggesting, yeah, this is a grim future, but understanding of economic incentives should reshape societies points to a solution. We can deliberately develop technologies that keep humans relevant. So, yeah, coming up, we've got, core social contract. Powerful actors require people to sustain their power. This is like the opposite of the resource curse. This is places like Canada or much of Western Europe. Lots of other examples. Yeah, governments need productive citizens for economies and militaries. Companies need talent for profits. Yeah, and the market serves humans both as consumers and producers. So this is like current social contract for places where people are doing comparatively well. AI is starting to upend this, as we've said in the previous section. The keys to power shift to non-human actors, that is like capital, AI control, that kind of thing. And the intelligence curse could incentivize a breakdown. So let's explore this a bit more. First question you might have is like, is society really, really that exposed to economic incentives? You could argue that like, well, economic incentives are important, but they're not the end all and be all. Like, there are things like kind of path dependence, or like, there are countries in the world that will really want to take care of their citizens because of like good government structures, regardless of the economic incentives. I think this is like, and the authors make the case that that can be true in the short term, but it becomes harder and harder to sustain in the long term. And they give, some examples of this, like you have hunter-gatherer to agricultural societies. There is a considerable amount of evidence in the anthropological record that like the transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural society is a pretty big step down in terms of like human well-being for most people. That is, hunter-gatherers tend to grow taller, because they had more diverse diets. They were comparatively more egalitarian. Once you started having people in like much larger groups, for like farming, for example, required like it was a much like simpler process. It was easier to confiscate people's food once you could like store grain and stuff. You can't really do that in hunter-gatherer society. So in a lot of ways, it was a step down. And that was effectively because there was this new technology. We learned how to grow food. And it wasn't that the societies that grew food were like, oh, amazing places to live, and all the hunter-gatherers like wanted to join up. It was more like the societies that grew food could sustain a larger population and then could go and confiscate resources from, or take over more parts of land that were previously being lived on by hunter-gatherers. And so it's unlikely that like it seems like the reasons for this are primarily economic incentives. And then this happened again during agricultural to industrial societies, has been a bit more of a pleasant story, and we have efficient markets. And for the reasons we said earlier, there's an educated workforce, and consumer wealth became important. That is, like, we moved into a society where like things are more complex now. You're going to want people to be able to, do a wider range of tasks, which means like, and there's more like cognitive labor. Effectively, the technology improved such that like presently it makes sense to invest in people, like we said recently. They had a really interesting smaller scale example I thought was cool. It's kind of, Stone Age to Bronze Age. So this is all still part of like within the agricultural period. But yeah, when you develop bronze working, like those who don't know, bronze is like an alloy of copper and tin. And tin is quite rare. It's like not many places on Earth you have very mineable tin. And so this became like bronze became like the hardest substance that people could craft with. But because it was so rare, you saw like the archaeological record shows like small concentrations of like, like really, really powerful, like warrior class that could afford the bronze, and they, rode chariots and kind of beat the crap out of like anyone else trying to use weapons to fight against them. Then when people figured out how to do ironworking, which requires much hotter furnaces, you use charcoal to burn the iron. But iron is very, very widespread in its crust. Like there's tons of places where you can mine iron out of the ground. And then you saw like a broadening of the kind of warrior class, in that like a much larger chunk of society could participate in warfare. Very bad for some reasons, but it was like effectively a bit more egalitarian than things in the Bronze Age. So again, these are just two examples of how like you would like huge changes across like large swaths of the world that were like very similar in the long run, just because development of new technology has certain economic incentives. These are meant to be examples just to make the case that like, sure, even though we have some bad dependence and inertia now, on a long enough time horizon, the economic incentives tend to win out of their game.
I shared an interesting paper related to this slide in the Toronto AI safety, channel in AIGS.
Yeah, if you're on the Slack channel, then you can check out the link from their team. If you're not on the Slack channel and wondering what that is, I'll have a slide at the end. Right. Yeah, and effectively, like the reason that these changes were pretty widespread, even in very, very different cultures that went through these changes, or that states must adopt competitive structures. That is, like technology determines what's competitive, And even if you go against what you're economically incentivized to do, the kind of other actors, the other companies, the other states that go like follow the incentives will end up with more power and can then outcompete you. So, is this going to be true? There's a counter argument here. Maybe AI will free us from competitive pressures. Like, sure, AI is going to change the social contract from what we have now, but it could open us up to like a lot of different possibilities for how we can avoid these negative incentives. So they talk about like three approaches that you could use AI to eliminate competitive pressures. So they say abundance, first of all. Like historically, periods where there's like a lot of resources to go around, they claim, I didn't get a chance to look into this too deeply. I think this might be true, but I'm not sure. But like the idea here is that the more abundance you have, the more your economy is growing, the more resources there are to go around, the less incentivized people are to kind of compete with each other and effectively, yeah, like have bad situations where people are left out or not taken care of. And like this should be relatively intuitive in that like if you have a growing economy, people who want more resources don't necessarily have to acquire those resources at the expense of other people. If you have a shrinking economy, for people who want to acquire more resources, or even for people to survive, someone else has to be losing out. So they argue if we just get sufficient abundance, this is not going to be a problem. Like even if humans only have like 1% of the economy taken care of us, if the economy is like 1,000,000 times as large, we'll be fine. Yeah, you can argue this provides some cushioning, but like, well, they said like human greed has no stopping point, and that like typically when there are more resources available, we just want more things. And also like eventually you're going to hit some constraints in terms of resources. Like even in the most wildly ambitious scenario, like where you just get like 100% growth every year, like eventually, the speed of light constrains like how many galaxies you can eat. And probably sometime before then we'll run into other like stopping points. So this can't be a solution forever. So yeah, abundance. Yeah, it seems like a temporary thing to help slow these dynamics, but not a long-term solution. Domination. So you could just like use AI to conquer the world and make sure it's the good guys who do it, and then you have like a single centrally controlled economy from the top down, eliminating these dynamics. Like technically that is a way that you can avoid some like coordination problems by just having like one benevolent dictator. I probably don't need to give you too many examples of why that might not work out well. And then the last one is coordination. So they're talking about this choice transition thing where humanity's collective preferences always decide. So they kind of acknowledge this is quite speculative. They're kind of pointing to the fact that like if we do have like, if we do have like really really impressive AI systems, they can probably open up a realm of possibilities in terms of like types of solutions for coordination problems we couldn't have thought of before. Like there's a lot of there are a lot of problems in the past that we've solved now with current technology and current like ideas and ideologies that have emerged that would be very hard to explain to like people in the agricultural during the agricultural revolution, just because they can't imagine it. And so just because we can't imagine coordination solutions to this doesn't mean they don't exist, but that does seem like wishful thinking. And they also acknowledge that like even if we have AI, like these galaxy brained AI systems helping us come up with these societal level solutions, it doesn't seem by default we're going to find those solutions using the AI before we have all these other negative effects. That is, like, we can right now see a very clear path to a lot of the labor replacing effects from AI that cause these dynamics, but there doesn't seem a super clear path to like these new solutions to coordination problems. I always want to point it at the screen, but you point to the computer. All right. Okay, so yeah, one thing they talk about here is differential technological development. Has anyone heard of this before? Mario has. Cool. Giles has half raised his hand. Oh well, Wim, thanks, awesome. Or if you've come across defensive accelerationism, like that was Vitalik Buterin's formulation of the idea, same concept. Basically, the idea is like a lot of what we've been talking about so far kind of assumed that like the development of technology leads in one direction, and like that determines the next technologies that can be built. And you can imagine this like a tech tree. Anyone play Civilization out there? Game like very few people. Okay. Any game where you have to develop you can choose which technology to develop, and that determines the next ones you can develop. And usually it's like if you're a data type, a directed acyclic graph, or just like it kind of there's like one direction of progress, more technology, and you kind of go in that direction. And it's not this clean in real life. Like, of course, we had to develop sufficient, telescopes before, to develop sufficient telescopes, we had to get sufficient glass working, and then once we have telescopes, we can like learn more things about like the universe and gravity. So this is true to a certain degree, but the concept of differential technological development says that like um, there is like we can make some choices about like which direction for technology to develop. It's it was unlikely that we develop like computers before the printing press, but like whether or not we developed the printing press before or after gunpowder does seem like a bit more of a question, right? So yeah, the idea here is that by being more selective about which technologies we pursue, we'll kind of pull the social contract or pull these dynamics in one direction or another. So it's a rejection of this idea that like technology is just like goes in a singular direction and like we're kind of pulled along by whatever incentives there. So I guess it's meant to be like a glimmer of hope after the earlier slides regarding like, well, the economic incentives are going to like win out in the end. But choosing what technologies we develop will determine what the economic incentives are. All right. Oh yeah, and then yeah, this is taken from Vital Buterin has an essay on this. I think it's called My Techno Optimism, which is quite good. And where he kind of talks about he contrasts like the anti-technology view that's like, oh no, if we develop more technology, we're gonna kill ourselves. So just like we need to like not go down the path. This is meant to be what's behind. We have this like, shining city on the hill. And you have the accelerationists are like, oh, there's a bear behind us, and that's like kind of disease and like I don't know, threat of nuclear war or whatever. And if we develop our technologies like vaccines, we'll get there. And I love this, I don't know why, but and he kind of has this like, oh, there are two paths here. There's a bear behind us. We have to go down one path or the other, and then we just need to choose the one that leads to the shining city on the hill. Okay, probably more of a visual example than you needed. You guys got the idea. Actually, any questions about this? I think this is a really cool idea. I kind of want to do some more advance on this topic, but yeah. So they say there's a good outcome here if we do select the technologies in a more careful way. So the good outcome is like humans can still create economic value of some kind and disrupt elites after AGI. Disrupting elites meaning like there is still like governments still need to depend on people, for their kind of power and resources. But so there is a good outcome here. They're hoping for that like humans can still produce meaningful economic value. If that works and we get like massive economic development from AI, this is really good because everybody has an unprecedentedly high standard of living. And there's like no single actor or oligarchy monopolizing AGI power, so we avoid that whole just top-down AI domination scenario. They want regular people to control their destiny, and humans should master their own futures. So they're saying that the way you get there with the differential technology development is we just need to figure out, okay, well, what technology will like empower humans more than operate independently from humans, which is like a big question. Okay, we'll get into that in the next section. Any questions about the social contract idea before you move on? Yes, Michael.
Similar to the Norman question, are there examples of that differential technology that, other than like nuclear weapons, that something where as a society building that we working?
Yeah. So sorry, where we developed a technology earlier or later than we could have and impacted this trajectory.
Some sort of directionality you can see. Hey, let's develop this first.
Oh yeah, I mean you could argue. Okay, so the question is like, do we have examples of kind of a deliberate pursuit of certain technologies for these reasons? I would argue that like any time a government like makes a choice to invest in like researching a certain thing, that's an example of that. Like right now, I would say that like probably investigating how to cure various forms of cancer is like you could make the argument that that's actually not like super economically productive because you're trying to help extend the lives of like people who are likely quite old and retired already. It's a bit of a contrived example, but like we do it anyways because like we would like to take care of elderly people in our society. I can think of something like the idea of vaccines, for example, like the first vaccine was developed because does anyone remember the guy's name? He observed milkmaids not getting smallpox. I should remember this guy's name. What's that? I think it was Edward Jenner. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Someone could look it up and tell me.
why do you assume that governments
I'm
will
going to
be
make my
misaligned?
point. I thought you were going to tell me who it was. But I will come to you next. So yeah, the example of vaccines was that like this person observed that like smallpox killing a ton of people, several hundred years ago. He observed that like milkmaids who spent a lot of time around the cows never got smallpox, but they all got cowpox, and cowpox was like a less severe form of pox. Where if you had cowpox, that would give you strong immunity. And so he like deliberately injected his 1-year-old son with cowpox. Um, uh, and luckily it worked. And the son was like the first person immune, vaccinated against smallpox. Like that was an observation that could have been made like a long time earlier. Like you could argue about like how well was like I don't think germ theory was super well developed at the time. You just would have had to observe that like if you get this earlier disease, this like more benign disease, you're immune against this other one. Like I don't know how you could have identified that like that could have happened earlier, but like that's an example of technology that could have happened sooner or later, and could have given a lot of people's lives. Sorry, go ahead, Abdul.
Two things that I don't understand is that what if the elites are aligned with their citizens and constituents?
Yep.
This would make it less problematic for there to be power concentrated in places which are trustworthy and, might counteract AGI itself having some agency,
Yeah.
right? And so if we have somebody who is a human being who is in charge of what the AGI does versus a place where AGI itself has significant influence or control over humans, right? Which might happen if you distribute AGI access to everybody, right? Like I'm trying to take devil's advocate here.
Yeah, so like an example of like, okay, well, currently the elites in power, you could argue that like, I don't know, places like the Canadian government, if you really trust it, or like, I have like relatively high confidence that like the leadership team at Anthropic are like well-meaning human beings, and like if they ended up dominating the world, like that would be less bad than a lot of other people. So like, what if you just have the people who are currently have a lot of resources and then would benefit from the AI stuff, if they're on everyone's good side, we're okay. We can hope for that, but I think probably the main counter argument to that would be it's like it's not just like the scenario where you don't have to take care of people anymore because you can get your resources from someone else. It's actually economically costly to do so. So you might end up in this competition dynamics might be such that like even if there's like I don't know 20 different countries and like 10 of them are very Norwayish and like use the benefits from AI to take care of people, and then the other 10 are not to pick any country in particular, just like not like that. The ones that don't take care of their people will be able to like redeploy those resources into perhaps building up more data centers or like destroying a lot of agricultural fields to deploy like stuff for the energy sector. So I think it would be great, and I think that like part of the solution may be just like we'll get into this in the next section actually on like how we can possibly fight that dynamic. But basically competitive pressures I think is the main answer to that question. Oh, let's go. How are we doing for time, by the way? I did not hear you. 7:38. Okay, cool. All right, so last section, breaking the intelligence curse. This is like a long to-do list. So we don't have to get super in depth, but this is like, here's like, 60 things we can do in different areas. So we can go through this like faster or slower if you're interested about some of these. I'll try to give like, it was very difficult to keep the section short, basically. But yeah, the intelligence curse will break the core social contract. This is basically the main thesis from the last 4 sections. I repeated the earlier summary. Sorry. Ignore that. Okay. So there are 3 approaches to breaking the intelligence curse. There are 3 different like types of things we can do. To say we need to avert catastrophe, we need to diffuse decentralized tech. I think someone in the audience was already asking about that, and democratize institutions. So let's get into these 3 categories of approaches. So the avert section. So the idea here is catastrophes or fear thereof often lead to centralization or more authoritarian tendencies, exacerbating the intelligence curse. When I was reading this part, like a little ding went off in my head, I was like, I was thinking of the earlier claim that like the only thing that like equalizes resources was basically a list of catastrophes. So I feel like there is some tension here between that and that part of this section, but there's this claim here that like if people are really, really afraid of certain types of bad scenarios, they're like one of the most obvious solutions is like, oh, just lock it down, have like these people we trust have all the power so no one else can do anything bad. And there are some examples of this, like Pause AI is an activist group that is like very, very concerned about like human extinction from AI. And yeah, one of their calls is like global governance regime, like they can decide when AI models over 1 billion parameters. By 1 billion parameters is very small for a model. That's like GPT-2, I believe. Um, like basically have like global government that can claim what can or cannot be deployed, even in the face of objections from individual countries. Nick Bostrom has an essay called "The Vulnerable World Hypothesis," which proposes a high-tech panopticon. The vulnerable world hypothesis is this idea where, like, every time you develop a new technology, it's sort of like pulling a ball out of this like box, and you don't really see what the color of the ball is, and in theory, there are some technologies that will destroy the world, and like we don't know that its technology is going to do this, and his proposed solution for this was just like a giant surveillance state. Yeah. Yeah, and then Aschenbrenner, you guys might have heard of situational awareness, was published in the last year, I think. This is someone who used to work at OpenAI. Essentially very, very concerned about like things like competition dynamics between the United States and China emerging from this, and like he had proposals to like lock down the labs, launch the project, which is like centralizing all of like AI development in like one Manhattan project type place. So that is like these people are very afraid of like very specific types of catastrophes, or I guess with Bostrom's it's a bit more general. But a lot of the solutions to that are very, very like centralizing pressures, which can exacerbate the dynamics in the intelligence curse. Yes.
I think the difference between this one and the one you mentioned before, the idea is this is the fear of it, not it happening, but fear of it happening.
Well, it's both. Sometimes there are legitimate crises that result in a concentration of power. But yes, it's both. Yeah, even if a disaster never strikes. I'm sorry, I should repeat the question. It was like you were sorry. What's your name? Ian was pointing out that that in these scenarios, these examples, it's actually not about a catastrophe itself. It's about the fear of it. That's true. But I think like if there is genuinely elevated risk of a catastrophe, that will increase the fear of it. So one of the ways of reducing fear of something is to actually just make it less likely. But yeah, there is the other dynamic of making people believe it's less likely. Right. So if you avert the catastrophes in the first place, this can enable liberty by removing the incentive to lock down centralized power. I mean, I don't remember who said it. There's a kind of a political phrase. What is it? Never let a crisis go to waste. And it was meant like if there is a crisis, you can use this to secure more power or make centralizing changes. I don't know if it was that specific, but yeah. Right. So if we can somehow like harden society against catastrophes in a non-centralization of power type way, that reduces the incentive for that to happen. Yeah. So this is they draw this image, this concept. I mean, this like the Center for AI Safety didn't come up with this idea, but this is the image. That's why I quoted them. But yeah, there's a Swiss cheese model of defense. I think this is used a lot in cybersecurity, where like there is no one solution that can like solve all your kind of harden you against all these risks. But if you have enough of them together, it's sort of like layers of Swiss cheese. Even though like a single layer has all these gaps in it, if you line up enough slices of cheese, then you're secure. And this is meant to be like an alternative to just like lock it all down and like have the people we trust have power over it. So yeah, this is like the general approach they have for the avert technologies. So yeah, they talk about biorisk being a big one. Like AI can increase the risk of things like bioengineered or engineered pandemics, for example. So they talk about like if we can stop pandemics from happening, then you can arguably reduce the incentive for some of these centralizing powers. I thought this was a bit strange that like KYC and like purchase tracking tools are like it feels a little bit like centralization power in some ways. But yeah, there was an example they gave that is like for potentially dangerous biological materials, like kind of similar to how we do anti-money laundering infrastructure. You can apply that to the world of bio. Yeah, and point two they had, which is almost the same thing, screening of orders from DNA synthesis providers, which this blew my mind. Apparently that's only a voluntary standard. But yeah, maybe make that a requirement. Yeah. And then they have something like wastewater monitoring. I thought this was a much better example. For those who don't know, wastewater monitoring is like, I hadn't heard of it before COVID, but like some places started to basically just take samples from wastewater in sewage systems, and they were able to kind of predict when there were going to be increased rates of COVID in certain areas just by like increased traces of the virus. I thought this was really cool because this seems like I want more ideas like that, because that's the example of something that does allow you to kind of track risks at a societal level, but it's like it's not particularly invasive of people's privacy. Unlike the first one is like arguably can be in that direction. So this is about like preventing pandemics, and then yeah, then they had, well, assuming some pandemics do happen, like what are some ways we can slow them that don't involve just like making everybody stay in their homes, or like, you know, do strict requirements of traveling, things like UVC lighting in HVAC systems. So yeah, basically zap the germs inside your air conditioning. Hades, which I had not heard of. This I'm gonna read more about this later on. But apparently this is like safe to breathe and kills pathogens. Yeah, so it works in a similar way. Or rapid distribution of vaccines. So like currently, like actually currently, I think the biggest bottleneck on getting vaccines deployed, as we saw during COVID, was not like the development of the vaccine itself. It was the human challenge trials. And so if there's a way that we can somehow speed those up, or kind of basically reach greater levels of certainty about the safety and efficacy of vaccines and distribute them, I guess manufacturing is also a big constraint. Yeah, that would help. Then a lot of the other kind of intuitively centralizing power solutions to vaccine or to pandemics would be reduced. So other than pandemics, they talk about cybersecurity threats. You know, they're expecting that AI will increase the risk of like, yeah, AI hacking incidents and stuff. So they divided this into two categories. There's the technical side of things, so formal verification of code. I have a vague idea of this is. Can someone technical give me a one-sentence explanation of this for lay people? Yes.
There was a presentation on that specific topic like a month ago.
I know, I forgot. Oh, but you attended it.
Yeah.
So what's the one-sentence summary of formal verification of code?
Can like mathematically like prove that this code will do this and specifically only this.
Okay, great. I like that. Okay, so yeah, a proof that code will do exactly what it's intended to do and nothing more. Yeah, this is like very, very expensive to do. Requires a lot of hard math and stuff. AI can make this much cheaper. So that would effectively kind of reduce the attack surface for cybersecurity attacks. The great refactor, just using AI to rewrite many existing code bases from the ground up. Right. The third one is, yeah, more just like if you have AI systems like continually monitoring your systems, you could argue that would increase defense a lot. I'll be honest, I didn't really understand this paragraph super well. You can look at it in greater detail, but just like the analogy I came up with reading it, I was like, is like, I don't know, if you have like a building, you can like make sure all the locks are secured and stuff. That's more like these two. But like the idea of like a security guard who's walking around, like, you know, right now it wouldn't make sense to pay someone to just be like chilling, like, oh, I guess larger companies will do this. Like you have like, I don't know, security professionals like on file looking for like suspicious activity, but you may be able to scale that up a lot more with AI. And then yeah, hardware security will matter more. Yeah, there's going to be more incentive to attack chips, and so tamper-proof chip enclosures are one approach. Yeah, basically make it hard to hack things. On the operational side of things, this is covering things like, yeah, usually people think of like hacking as like something down the command line, but hacking can often be things like social engineering and stuff like that. And you know, through like phishing emails, you can have LLMs scanning them automatically. LLMs making, you know, monitoring, or LLMs can monitor logs for signs of suspicious activity in ways that would be too expensive to have humans do that. And yeah, more fine-grained permission systems. So other than that, I think they forgot to flesh this section out, to be honest. It was just one sentence. They said physical security advances. Due to cheap autonomous drones or robots with lethal capabilities. I don't know if that means like make our buildings stronger or something, but yeah. Any ideas for this one? Just hardening physical systems. Cool. Right. AI alignment stuff. We talk about this a lot here on Thursday. That's just making sure the AIs are going to do what you want them to do and not more. So this was like, we probably could have made a list of 20 of these things, scalable oversight, just to make sure that even as the AIs get more powerful, we still have assurances, or we still have kind of are able to shape their behavior in a desirable way. Interpretability, basically looking to the insides of AI systems and making sure and getting a better understanding of like how and why they do the things they do. Automated alignment research, just just make the AIs align themselves. Yeah, if you're interested in these topics, like I think probably half of our Thursday sessions are trying to solve this specific problem. AI control, just assuming that the AI systems are misaligned, like how do we make sure that we can still have them in our control? Yeah, so a lot of this is just like very classic AI safety type stuff. Yeah, so all right, so that's like this section of like just avert, make sure we don't have these catastrophes that will push us more towards these yeah, negative competition dynamics. I one thing like has anyone here heard about like a concept of like warning shots within AI? There's like 10 people I know here I've talked about it with, and only 3 in the book per hand. So the concept of a warning shot, thanks guys. The concept of a warning shot is like people talk about this as like a wake up call, essentially when like, oh, there's like an AI system that like ends up like, I don't know, hacking the whole power grid and then like a bunch of people die as a result or something. People talk about this as like, oh, like if this happens, that may wake up the world to like properly take governance seriously. Um, and and to be clear, that's not people being like, we should do this. It's kind of like there's discussion about whether or not we'll get like a not quite, catastrophic level event, but something that makes sure it's clear. And that's often talked about like if that happens, that may increase our ability to deal with threats going forward because we'll take it more seriously. These guys are making the opposite case with that. Basically, if catastrophes happen, that's like not going to be good for stealing society against it. So I don't know. I wasn't sure what to make of it. In any case, don't do warning shots. Yeah. So diffuse technology. This was yeah, again very related to what I think 1 or 2 of the commenters had pointed out. Like a lot of this involves like this situation where you have this like ruler that's got the AI system on his side. And if everybody has an AI on their team, then that'll be a great equalizer. And if an AI system is more like a phone than it is a yacht, then you can expect it does have an equalizing effect. Yeah, so they make a lot of proposals about how you can potentially diffuse AI technology more widely. So yeah, the first is like human augmenting tech. So they give an example of Cursor. For those who don't know, this is I believe at the time of writing, it was the fastest growing AI startup. And it's a tool to allow software developers to use AI systems to write more effectively. And they bring this up as an example of like, Cursor is not, unless they've added it, it's like it's not an agent. It's not like you just tell it build this app for me. It's like it allows like developers to do more. Oh, I'm getting this hand from Jasper. Is it moving in a more agentic direction?
Yes.
Oh no. Okay. This is
Yeah.
This is a few months old, so which is ancient, I guess, in AI times. Yeah, but like as it stands right now, you still need a human in the driver's seat. So yeah, but like they give an example of like we should be focusing more on technologies that allow humans to do more, rather than kind of like allow humans to just or allow AIs to replace humans. Which like, yes, I agree. That sounds good, but I mean, it seems hard to deploy in practice. Anyways, the idea here is they point out that like even if we get to this point where AI is does reach this threshold of AGI where it can kind of do anything a human can do, but better and faster and cheaper, there's still going to be this period of time, arguably that we very clearly are in right now, where kind of like human AI systems in cooperation beat like pure AI systems in the vast majority of domains. That is very true, and they argue that like we can use the kind of differential technological development approach to focus on like types of technologies that will extend that period as long as possible to give us more time to kind of implement some of the other solutions for this stuff. Yes.
It actually feels like to me that the authors are saying, like, focus more on the narrow impact as opposed to doing, but that would be a mistake. Did you feel that?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, so the question was like whether or not that's an example of like focusing more on narrow AI versus general AI. So narrow AI being AIs that can do like one task really well, like chess, or like identify tumors in a mammogram. Like that those are examples of narrow AI, whereas like more general AI is chatbot that can talk to you about a wide range of things. So yeah, I think that like I think the if you were to make a graph of like narrow AI versus general AI, you probably would get like a very, very strong correlation with AIs that augment humans a lot better than replace humans. Yes.
Why is it safer to have user-aligned AI agents tied to individuals? If you look at current model deployment practices, it's unusual to expose the internals of a model to API users, because if you have access to training, then this can be used to produce like influence campaigns or like other undesirable things. So are you proposing that model developers would open up their internal proprietary models to make it the gap between open source AIs and internal AIs uh, minimal? And how would this affect the offense defense balance? Like one person with a bad agent is trying to attack other people who have, do you believe that the defense will
Yeah.
be because there will be more compute capabilities?
I think I understand. Yeah. So the question is like, well, what does that say about like open source AI? Like, if we're trying to diffuse technology and more, like, would it make sense for these companies to try to open source
How is this?
as much of the technology? Yes, they absolutely are in favor of that. They make it very clear that like they think open source is better. Open source allows more people to take advantage of these tools, and that will reduce the kind of intelligence curse dynamics by not concentrating power in the elites, whether those elites are AIs or human. Right. So, yeah, basically augment humans rather than replace them. Yeah. Pro-human user interfaces. So they argue that like they talk about we haven't seen Steve Jobs level product insight and design applied to any AI tool. Yeah, I wasn't really sure what they meant here or how to imagine what that would look like. But yeah, if you can develop like yeah AI tools that are more like smoothly integrated into human workflows rather than ones that are very very clunky to interact with more, then yeah, I can see how that would encourage more augmented human AI systems. Go ahead.
You know what?
Oh, is that? I know Cluely because of that.
Yes.
Okay, the question was, do you know what Cluely is? Is that the one that was like advertising it, help you cheat on everything? Yes. Okay.
So, like, thing that really was really well compared to other startups that are doing the same thing is that they have a really good UI, or at least a way for you to interact with the AI and your computer in ways that's like really seamless. So if you want, you can deliver that, because that's what a lot of people are saying, like differentiates Cluely from a lot of the other startups, is that you make it really easy to use AI everywhere, super easy.
Gotcha. Okay. So Cluely, an example of a tool that yeah is really really killing out in UI. All right. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. They were a bit short of specific examples in this section, I felt. Yeah. So yeah, they talk about increasing human AI human bandwidth. I guess this is arguably kind of what Cluely is doing. But yeah, the specific examples here, they said augmented reality tools will help a lot. Like if you just have tools where you can go around the world, kind of feeding you more information about the world around you and allowing you to be more effective. That would help. They talk about brain-computer interfaces. That is things like Neuralink. They mentioned a bit about how like it's really important that these be like non-intrusive, like don't require surgery or something you could just wear, because then more and more people will use them. As an example of something they want to see more of. Right, they talk about localized AI capabilities. That is, things that don't require you to kind of go to the same central actors. Easy fine tuning of AI models. Again, this overlaps a lot with the open source stuff. Decentralized robotics. That is, when robotics catches up. Robotics seems like something that is going to be less naturally diffused throughout society, and that software, especially like you don't really have open source like robotics in the same way. I mean, arguably you do, but like you still need to source materials and like have the physical goods manufactured. Whereas open source technology is like you can just download and copy it wherever you need to go. So yeah, they wanted more decentralized robotics in some way, like so you don't have to go to the same robot manufacturer. Yeah, they talk about helping humans own and control local data. They want to see more distributed training runs. I forget the name of the firm they talked about is like working on this. See if I can find it later. Yeah, they want local compute for running more powerful models, and cheap AI in general, especially open source AI. For those of you who come to our sessions before, like a lot of this stuff kind of goes counter to a lot of the other types of risks people are worried about, like things from bad actor misuse and stuff like this. So this was a strange section for me to read. They talk about policies for diffusion. So like earlier they were talking about what are the technologies we'd like to see developed. And now they're talking about like, what are government policies, what are like things we can do at the cultural level to try to influence here. And one of the broad categories was like upskilling humans in the areas that will bottleneck the AI economy. So, again, before we get to this point where like AI can do literally everything, in theory, there's this period where like, humans are still quite relevant. And yeah, like we can't expect that there's going to be rapid change throughout the economy, and that might make it harder for people to actually find new jobs if, like, by the time they've been retrained, then the economy has changed again, essentially. Whereas if we like really double down on like using AI to, help people upskill and learn new things, like by having like AIs for job tutors or yeah, these educational experiments. Yeah, the first three categories I effectively see as ways that we can just help people upskill. Yeah, they talk about needing better forecast giving capabilities and their bottlenecks. Yeah, this is like, I don't know how much this is a technological problem versus just like an investment society problem. But yeah, they basically they're calling for effectively governments and institutions to invest heavily into like trying to figure out where things are going to go so they can anticipate it. And then I thought the last one that jumped out is like not really belong in the category, but like, yeah, they can ban AI systems from owning any assets. If you like don't allow AI systems to own assets, then at least a human somewhere down the line will be the one owning what's going on. I don't know how effective this is going to be.
Would this prevent us from making deals with AIs that might be misaligned? Saying that we do something for them in exchange for like them not taking action to this.
Okay, the question is, wouldn't banning AI systems from owning assets mean we cannot trade with misaligned AI systems?
Yes. So
is that good or bad?
Like there's a post by Butler's about making deals with potential schemers, with early schemers.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you could argue that would reduce our ability to kind of negotiate with and cooperate with AIs that somehow get loose or like somehow find themselves in possession of resources. Yeah, I'm not super confident that this one is like a knockdown argument because even if you don't legally own something, there are ways to still control resources through like indirect means. But yeah, this is one thing they called for. They called for a lot of things at the end of this, and like I really wish I had time to like dig into all of them. But yeah,
you can ban it only one, but enforcing it would be difficult. If you have a sufficiently capable agent, it can just seize control of servers.
Yeah, the enforcement can be very difficult. Right, and then the last section, so we had avert, which was like stopping catastrophes. They had diffuse, make sure the access to the technology is distributed very widely. They have democratized, that is, do what we can to make sure institutions are more anchored to the desires of humans they serve. So, yeah, that is like, how do we? I kind of thought of this as like, how do we get as close to like Norway pre-oil as we can? And yeah, this is what they call for. They wanted representation. So yeah, first they had like they had technologies and then policies. So the technologies they want people to experiment with digital advocates and large scale feedback collection. That is like, if you have like a simulated version of yourself that can like vote on everything, like it makes things like more direct democracy plausible. Just ways that like the governments can more effectively like find out what their citizens' needs and desires are, and then implement them. Things like verification and trust. Yeah, so they talked about human verification, just like making CAPTCHA, but better. AI systems as trusted third-party auditors and also advisors, just like building AIs that are specifically designed to help people. And AI-powered tracking of government activities. Yeah, so kind of the opposite of government surveillance is like surveillance of government by citizens. I think this is actually like, as a concept, this is one that I thought was really interesting in the kind of differential technological development concept of like, we often talk about like, I guess you call it transparency when you talk about like a power that be is like, you're able to check what it's doing. But yeah, they're basically talking about like greater developing technologies that give us greater transparency into what the current governments are doing. Again, they referred to this earlier on the presentation about things like coordination. They talk about contract negotiation, automated AI-based enforcement of contracts. So like developing and enforcing, or not enforcing, but like adhering to a contract is quite costly. Like, that basically that's why, lawyers are expensive, right? You pay them to develop, to develop kind of airtight contracts and to kind of like analyze one you've been proposed to. the authors here argue that like if we can use AI to automate this process so that you can develop contracts more quickly and it's less costly to kind of check to make sure you're not signing off into something that's going to screw you later. This can, yeah, they argue this can be like an equalizing technology. And then, yeah, the information environment. Yeah, contrary to, I think early on someone talked about having like an army of bots, kind of helping with ones like campaign. The opposite side of that, try to distribute things like fact-checking systems. You could argue community, X's community notes at scale. For those who don't know, like at Twitter, or X only knows Twitter, like that is probably, in my opinion, the thing they did most well. I don't know a lot of the other changes, but they have the system where like you can add a community note as a fact check and like to prevent like gaming of the system, like the community notes that appear are ones that people who have that fact-checking accounts that have historically disagreed with each other. If a lot of them agree, then it gets shown. And so if you can somehow like distribute this at scale, that can like help ward off disinformation. And then yeah, there's concept of internet gloves that is like AI to pull information from platforms in selective, non-addictive ways. Like we've seen how there are platforms like a lot of social media platforms are just like optimizing for engagement, like what is going to make you click and like stay glued to the screen for as long as possible. If we can develop technology where like people can apply their own like filter on like social media platform, the apps they use, or the internet, where like you're like, okay, like please source for me like content you think I will find enjoyable, but like don't optimize for engagement. Like I only want to spend 5 minutes looking at something interesting. I thought that was an interesting idea. I'm like surprised I hadn't heard of it before. It would be very interesting examples of that. I spent too much time scrolling Twitter. Yeah. Democratizing policies. Yeah, again, not technologies, but policies. These are things they're effectively calling on governments and institutions to do. They want to pass campaign finance reform, reforming anti-corruption laws. I mean, like these, it just seems like a bit of a bucket list of like good things to do anyways. But yeah, fair enough. I'd be happy to see more of these things. Making courts and legislatures faster. I think this is like very relevant for like right now the speed, like our most like very, very well effective governments right now are based on like democracy when it took like weeks for a letter to be delivered from one part of the country to another, and we have these like parliamentary elections and stuff, and they work like arguably kind of well for the last like 200 years, but the pace of technological development is accelerating, and it becomes very, very hard for systems based on like kind of very slow voting processes to keep pace with the development of AI. So they're arguing like we should prioritize like speeding up these systems to some capacity so they can deal with developing technology. And and in general, preemptively prepare for a world where lots of regular people don't provide immediate economic value. Like right now, our governments all are based on this idea that like a huge portion of the population like works and produces taxes and pays them and like provides critical roles in the economy. That may no longer be the case, and they argue governments need to prepare. That's the presentation. Right. Thank you for coming. I know it was a bit of a fire hose of just ideas right at the end. But yeah, I'm happy to take questions, especially if you guys want to go back and look at some earlier slides. Anyone?
Is there a link where we can find these slides online?
Yes, we have a YouTube channel now. We stream all of these. If you go to the YouTube channel, and in the description there'll be a link to the slides. Just Trajectory Labs is the name of the YouTube channel. Yeah.
It says the video is private.
It says the video. Oh no. Okay. All right. We're still learning. We just started streaming them. We will post the video publicly later on, and it will include the slides there. Someone had a question. Yes.
Do you foresee a system where they have like a handful of competing AGI systems overseeing each other? So maybe governments have an AGI that is looking for signals for other private AGIs or foreign AGIs to see any interface, create any interface to
So you're asking if I foresee a system where you have like a variety of AGIs and they all basically keep checks on each other to make sure some of them don't get out of hand. I think that sounds good. Um, I am skeptical of like how effectively we can reach like an equilibrium there. Um, like the more different systems you like, the more complex your system is, I think the harder it is to make sure that it's like reliable and doesn't kind of drift into some negative like power play dynamics. So that would be nice, and you could argue like the sections of the slide, like some of this stuff like is like meant to be developing those very systems. So yeah, that's a potential solution, trying to use AI to effectively like make robust certain parts of our institutional or culture. But yeah, like, it's hard to predict how that would work without knowing how the technology is going to develop. Yes.
Uh, how much in your reading or in these works are you seeing people talk about? I don't know, I saw the whole presentation. Uh, Talking about the problems with society as opposed to the problems with AI. Like, for example, in one of the sections, decentralization was proposed as a potential solution.
Mm.
It won't be AI who forces us to decentralize. It will be a human decision based on human needs and human governance dynamics. These influenced by AI. But I'm just wondering, it really seems to me like it's a human governance issue, AI being the technology example. But how much of that do you see in the dialogue?
Like about how much like okay, so like um so your observation is that like a lot of times when we talk about how AIs are going to impact things, we talk about like, oh, AI is being developed and this is a, like these types of AIs are bad, these types of AI are good. And is your question like why isn't there more of a focus, or like how much of a focus is there on like trying to assess like the degree to which like humans or human institutions are bad? Is that a good summary of the question?
Like,
Yeah.
Is AI broken or is society broken? And
Yeah. Well, okay. So um, I don't think either of those frames is like super because okay, so I'm just talking about my personal opinion now because it's a very broad question. I think that like it doesn't make sense to think that like AI or humans are inherently like broken or good. Like I think that there are like a lot of like behaviors and tendencies that humans have, and like some of them have very good outcomes and some of them have very bad outcomes. And like even aside from AI, there's a lot of ways in which I would like human institutions to improve, or like I would like society to incentivize people to behave better. Um, so, like, I agree that that's an important lens as well, but I don't think it's necessarily like, are humans the problem or AI is the problem? I think the better approach is like, okay, we're developing this AI technology. How can we expect it's going to impact society? What actions can we take to influence humans or AIs to move in a better direction? Um, does that answer the question? I mean, it's not like a solution, but I don't.
it seems like a thing we could debate, but this is the question area, so.
Yeah, like
That's-
like I think it's a good thing to ask about, but like I think we need to hold this like conversation about just that.
Well,
Sort of, yeah.
I guess just my final little comment is that AI is a technology example. So it is in the backdrop of society as opposed to us being on the backdrop of AI. That's my
Yeah. I think that's currently the case. Yeah, I would agree. Yes.
I'm just wondering, did these essays talk about the incentivizing AI content? Because like what I'm hearing now, at least around people that are like younger, is like the way that younger people use AI is a lot different because they use it to like augment their learning. Like in schools, they're like, oh, ChatGPT teach me how to do X, Y, and Z, and ChatGPT do this for me, you know? And even with online, if people post like, oh, I made this with AI art, like younger kids are like bullying them on TikTok and like YouTube. And even on YouTube, they have de-incentivized like AI content where they're not, if you like post AI content, you're not getting paid for it anymore. So like, did they talk about de-incentivizing like AI content in general and just promoting stuff where it's like human made or at least human created?
Got it. Okay, yeah. So the question is like, did these essays talk about providing disincentives for AI content? And then if I understand you correctly, because this could potentially provide a solution where like if you're not allowed to distribute like AI art, this kind of produces produces like a demand for human generated art and potential. Is that am I on the right track here?
I know. I would just like,
Yeah.
at least the younger generation I'm seeing is if you are using AI stuff and you're not like just AI stuff, it's seen as like lower value compared to
Mhm.
people who are just using human created things.
Yeah. Okay, so I think there's a case to be made here that like sure, like even if AIs can do all sorts of things, sometimes people just want something that's human made. Like right now, if you want um like a mug or something like that. If you want like a perfectly round shaped mug, it's probably going to be manufactured, but people actually pay a premium for like handcrafted goods. Um, I think I agree that like when there's like inherent demand just for like human created goods, that does carve out like a small niche. My expectation is that I suspect the authors would agree, but I don't know because they didn't talk about it specifically. But my expectation is that that's like um, uh, still going to be a very comparatively small part of the economy, and it doesn't seem like um, it it doesn't seem like it's ever going to be something large enough that it will be like the main determining factor in like which states or companies like retain broad power in the world. Um, so it's probably something that will be at play and is going to be a factor, but I don't think it's going to be significant enough to change the dynamics at play here. Jack.
Um, I'm curious if you like had the same sense as me. So like, I feel like the first half of the presentation is like, you know, uh, people or organizations that use AI are going to be like, vastly more effective, and they're going to outcompete people who like don't use AI. And like, uh, because like the people who can control these things, like don't need to care about people anymore. They can sort of just like do basically anything they want without a human in the loop. Like the incentives are not aligned to like help out, random citizens. And then I feel like all the solutions they talked about, they don't really address this like fundamental issue of like the incentives are misaligned and like the AIs will outcompete humans. Like they talk about like, oh, like maybe we can like give ourselves a few extra years by like making humans more effective with AIs, but like these things are not going to be around for a few years. They're going to be around forever. Like the AIs are not going to, always be behind humans. And then all these like technologies or like the diffuse category of solutions where they're like, oh, we can like open source it and like people will be able to run their own AIs, but like, the people who already have lots of capital will just be able to have so many more GPUs and so much more compute that they'll basically be able to do again whatever they want, and they won't care about like the incentives of like their citizens. And I feel like none of the solutions address the problem that they set up in the start.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll try and summarize. If the authors seem to spend a lot of time making a somewhat compelling case for these like bad like overarching incentives, and then none of the solutions they provide though really seem to address those super directly or seem to be like robust solutions. I think this is a very good critique. I think my most charitable interpretation of like the final section is like the technologies are meant to like well you have the analogy of like Norway and that like this is a country that like manages to buck the trend for some period of time. How can we develop technologies that a extended period we have to make our institutions more robust? Uh, then once we make the institutions more robust, we can like have more Norway-like dynamics for a longer period of time, and then hopefully during that period of time, the AIs will help us like unearth some sort of like coordination mechanism or solution that allows us to avoid the dynamics. I think that's the idea here, but I would agree with the broader point that they haven't really compellingly pointed to like a very good solution to this. Um, Again, I don't know the authors, but I would suspect they probably would be like, yeah, fair enough. We kind of identified these like negative incentives, and then we did our best to like, here's a whole bunch of things that might help a little way, more research needed. Yeah, does that?
Yeah.
I know it's not a super satisfying answer, but like, have I understood the question correctly
Yeah.
at least? Yeah, okay. Cool. Yes, Savannah.
There's structural conditions under which like the diffusion solutions become non-possible though. Like the main one I'm thinking of to your point is it's entirely possible that there's diminishing returns on intelligence, right? Like if someone has 200 IQ, so that would be like way better at intelligence. But like imagine if you have like 2,000 IQ, like how much better would that actually be? Like in chess, so it's like it's possible that in the marginal returns on intelligence kind of level off at a certain point. then I guess the diffusion realities is more possible, like that kind of, diffusion of power.
Okay, so the idea is that there might be like a ceiling or a leveling off or kind of like diminishing returns to AI. And then if that is the case, then I guess we would see less rapid AI development and then expectation that the technology would be easier to diffuse. Am I on the right track?
I think it would still be competition. It's like any edge would still be sort of useful, but it's just like for most people, I guess, like we're not really going to compete at the cutting edge like that. I guess I'm going to call it. I've seen like you probably still get more by putting more memory in, but not just like more.
Diminishing returns. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much less difficult, right? The only people who want to compete are like a few efforts, and then if the benefits are sufficient, like maybe most people don't bother doing like at risk.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I guess the question is like if you do hit like rapidly diminishing returns to AI, or if there's some sort of ceiling on how useful it can be, how would that affect the dynamics here, in particular diffusion? I think it's a valid point. Um, I think that there probably is this meaningful threshold. If AI gets to the point where it can more cheaply replace virtually all human labor, then I think that matters not as much because you've sort of reached this just like this point at which like you're sort of relying on inertia or things you set up beforehand to keep humans relevant. Whereas if we hit this like ceiling or slowdown or point diminishing returns long before AI has like really replaced like everything humans can do, then I think a lot of these dynamics effectively dissipate. Like a lot of the kind of underlying assumptions about like trends of like subsistence level wages being like wages going below subsistence level. A lot of that stuff I think like doesn't apply if you hit that ceiling before you can really replace all of humans. So it seems to me like it's kind of an all or nothing thing, whereas you get that far or you don't. Yes.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Last slide, I guess.
Like the QR codes or the content? The content.
It's interesting what they listed as government actions, and there's maybe an assumption that courts and legislatures should be faster. I guess another viewpoint is that one of the reasons that we have government systems that are riskless and slow is it's more of a feature than a bug in some ways. So wouldn't some of the things that we're trying to protect, like we favor things like legibility over complexity in decision making to support transparency and ensuring that people understand, how government decisions are made, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we be trying to protect those pillars as well? And to keep, I guess the slower pace of government is also the types of things that would deter governments from adopting AI into decision making without testing those things out.
Okay, yeah, I think this is a really good point. Yeah, so Delina makes the point that like making governance and legislations faster is like not necessarily better. I presented it as like, oh, these are like old outdated systems that can't keep pace with AI. I think this is a very valid point that actually there's a lot of reasons why you want government to be slower. I don't know if you said exactly this, but like if a decision is made by a government entity like super fast, then you move on, you might get something like less transparency. Or if like government is like changing super fast, that's like a more difficult environment to like do business in or for society to exist in. Am I on the right track here? Is that yeah? I think that's a valid point. I could definitely see scenarios where making courts and legislatures faster could perhaps exacerbate these dynamics. What was the other example you gave? Oh yeah, about how like if you like made courts and legislatures faster and just had government operate at a faster pace, then you might actually see AI diffusion or AI adoption within the power structures happen even faster. Yeah, I don't have a good counterpoint. I think that's a really good challenge to be on. Second last bullet point there.
For society to be able to follow.
Yeah, and it's less legible for society to follow what's going on. Yeah, fair critique. I don't have a good rebuttal. Yes.
And so, yeah, I just want to go back to about how AI can like resolve all the cycle classes. It was like recycling.
So
Sorry, it was when they were talking about how it'll make it harder for people to advance through society.
like it was how it was like gradually dissolving like society classes until it reaches.
Oh, the pyramid section.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually sorry, it was a bit blurry. That was meant to be a company, not a society, but I think you could argue similar dynamics. Yeah,
Yeah.
this section, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all this part. So yeah, I just got some thoughts like how this can evolve given the ambitious and also the like yeah, like the extent that we are putting for the AI to evolve over time. Like at the point that we reach or it like supersedes all the human power, like how this can like yeah how the human can explain like the consequences of changes in their lives, like especially their lifestyle. If like AI can do everything, so how the moral principles of like equal opportunities for everyone, like can be still like in place.
So I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, morally speaking, like at the end of the day, when the AI can reach the, maybe let's say the ultimate point, we can have like more power than the humans, like how like the government, let's say, can explain like that they are offering equal treatment for equal opportunities for everyone. If AI can do all already the work and can also like do everything, almost everything.
Okay, so are you asking about like, okay, let's say there's a world where this is going on and governments are adopting more and more AI. Like how would they explain that to their citizens?
Yeah, I mean, currently, like we know what democracy means. We know what equal opportunities for everyone, like you know, deserves a job, like you know, decent background, like or like degree. So at some point, maybe this won't be real, yeah, anymore. So,
Yeah, I think that's the main risk that they're talking about through the first two sections is like,
yeah, at the
yeah.
end of the day, how like everyone, like how would we expect the human to react in that situation? Like,
oh yeah,
blaming humans? Or
oh yeah.
blaming AI? Like, and what be the legal framework in that situation?
I have no idea. I like it depends how obvious it is. If like these things happen like very gradually or smoothly, people might not realize it's happening. If it happens like in a big jolty kind of way, you could see mass kind of as someone had pointed out, like what happens if people just like burn down the data centers. I think it would depend on how visible it is, and there's a bunch of different possible ways that like people could react while it's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, this very well to me. I see it like gradually evolving as like the major revolutions that we had back in the time. So like industry revolution or like how we ended up like you know in the climate change. So are we really conscious about everything we are doing already? Something,
Yeah, if the question is like how conscious are people about what's going on, I would argue like not very, and we're doing our best to like make people more aware of what may happen. So
I'm not looking for an answer, but just like
it's a valid point. How are people going to react when they see stuff going on? We'll see, I guess. Yeah. All right. Anyone else? Cool. All right. Let's wrap that. I will leave these QR codes up for a while. If you're interested in keeping in touch with us, you feel free to join the AIGS Canada Slack. AIGS, for those who don't know, is a Canada-wide nonprofit that does political advocacy for better AI governance in Canada, and it's going to be the QR code. Oh man, there's a lot of slides. On the left, that's to join the Slack workspace. And if you're interested in more events here, we do events every Tuesday, every Thursday. You can subscribe to our calendar on the right. If you go there and are like, Mario, there's no events, we will announce them all tomorrow for August. Thanks so much for coming. Feel free to hang out for a while.